Okay, and we're live. Welcome, everybody. We are now live. You're in the right place. If you're looking for CCIM San Diego webinar, we're going to be starting in about 3 minutes. So we should be kicking off right at 12 o'clock. And we were just talking about how traffic is already coming back. What was that, Paris?
I was going to ask, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, I think, and many people could probably understand this. Everything, Ellen and I were talking about this, everything is just, it really is disrupted. I mean, life has definitely changed over the last 18 months for everybody. Traffic is, it was there, like we were talking about saying, and then it went away. And now I'm looking out my window and Highway 8 and traffic is starting to come back, but there's still a lot of disruption. I think certainly this webinar is going to be timely because it's going to talk about, you know, how the office environment has changed. I mean, our office has been pretty vacant here. I don't know, you guys are both working from home, right?
Yes, and our office has been downsized and remodeled to accommodate this new normal. So it's definitely different from before.
Yeah, things changing, and it'll be interesting to see how it continues to change, right? Things are going to change, things will evolve. Some things will just go away, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get to welcome a lot of new wonderful things too.
Yeah, that's usually the case, right? When you think of major things that have happened in the past, there's always been innovation that's spawned new technology. I mean, look at Zoom, for crying out loud. Zoom has become the new Kleenex. You know, you get on a Zoom call.
I like.
They were in the right place at the right time, for sure, with their technology.
I'm very handy for all of us. Zoom.
Yeah. Certainly for these webinars, you know, we had to pivot. We're still not looking or have a timeline for when we're going to become live again with our lunch and learns. So, you know, it's anybody's guess how things are going to pan out. But the good news is we're still presenting. In fact, on that note, it's now 12 o'clock and we're not going to penalize the punctual. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I am going to make an adjustment here and say hello. It's great to see everybody. We are now fresh back from our summer break. We missed a month of Lunch and Learns here at CCIM San Diego, but we're delighted to be back. And this month, of course, we've coming out with a great presentation, very timely, with Gary London, a very well-known luminary, I guess is a great word for it, in the development space here in San Diego County. I'm Doug Tabor, your host today. I am a rental property broker with Keller Williams Commercial, and I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Ms. Paris Moe. Paris is a sustainability manager with Verdani Partners. Paris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be here as always.
Perfect. Well, we're happy that you're back with us, and we're happy to see that we have folks on the line today. We have Ellen in the background, and Ellen is going to be managing our administrative slides. So Ellen, if you want to jump to the next slide, we will talk a little bit about housekeeping. As in the past, you are in listen-only mode. So that means you could ask questions via the chat box, but we will not be able to hear you. Please use the Q&A box to submit all your questions for the panelists. We are going to be doing Q&A. I know a lot of you probably have questions for Gary London, so please submit those questions. We did receive a few questions on the front end of this, so we'll definitely be asking those as well. By the way, this webinar is going to be recorded. It's being recorded now. So if you have to step away, you're not able to stay for the whole event, not a problem. You will receive a copy of the recording and We will post it down the road on our CCIM YouTube channel. Okay, here's our agenda today. We are going to be doing our introduction to the topic. We're going to be meeting with our webinar sponsor for the day. We're going to recognize our annual sponsors. Of course, we're going to do our audience poll, which is always a lot of fun. We're going to introduce our speaker, and then Gary is going to be presenting for about 30 or 40 minutes with Q&A, and then we are going to wrap up right at 1 p.m. So now I'd like to introduce our webinar sponsor for the day. We're so delighted to have Comstock. Comstock is a nationwide commercial real estate data platform, and we are joined by Sang Ha. Sang is the market development manager for, sounds like the Southern California region. So Sang, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Doug.
Wonderful. Well, Sang, the floor is yours. I know we have a brief slide deck that you're going to go through, and tell us a little bit about Comstock.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sang Ha. I am a market development manager for Comstock here in the Los Angeles office. And we're very excited to be sponsoring this webinar for CCIM. And so I'm just going to do a quick introduction of our company and how you can use Comstock as a resource. So Comstock is a commercial real estate lease and sales data and analytics platform. And the platform I'll be talking about today is specifically the exchange platform, which is where commercial real estate brokers and appraisers are able to trade the comps they have for the comps they need. And we also have a national partnership with CCIM. So as members of CCIM, you are able to get additional benefits on our platform. So I have a quick fun graphic here to show you how comps and data was being shared before Comstock and today. So a lot of the brokers were trading comps over the phone, via email, during monthly or weekly meetings. And Comstock was also actually founded by a broker, Michael Mendel in New York City, who thought that there would be a better way to share data with brokers through an online centralized platform, where instead of having to call multiple brokers, you can just log onto the platform and look for the comp that you need. And that's really what Comstock is. And all the data that you see on Comstock are from our users who are brokers and appraisers. So all the data is from the CRE professionals who are currently active in the market. And here's how you can access our data. So the exchange platform is free, and our users first submit their comps to Comstock, and in return, they'll receive our virtual currency called credits. And with those credits, our users are able to unlock other comps that they need that other users have submitted. So specifically for the San Diego market, we currently have just over 41,000 lease and sales comps, 23,000 being lease comps, and 17 of them are sales comps. And you might be wondering, how do I know the comp that I'm seeing on Comstock is accurate? And here's how we verify all of our data. So all the comp submissions first goes through our machine learning algorithm that will first standardize the data and mark any anomalies in the data. And then it'll be reviewed by our research team manually, who will go as far as to contact the submitter sometimes and ask for further verification so that we can put it publicly on our platform and for our users to see. And our last piece of verification is our community regulation piece. So all of our users are constantly giving us feedback on our data on a daily basis. So if they see something that seems a bit strange, then they let us know and we'll take the comp down temporarily and we'll start an investigation and repeat the verification process. And here are some examples of the files that we receive. We process over 60,000 transactions per month. And our users are able to submit their comps in any format. So a lot of them do export it right out of our database, but they are able to submit them in PDFs, Excel files, and also screenshots. And sometimes we've had brokers tell us the comp details over the phone. So we really want to make it easy for our brokers and save them time. And that's really the goal with our platform. And here are some statistics about Comstack and our users. So we currently have just over 30,000 members trading comps with us, covering 750,000 properties. And we have received 4 million comp submissions since our launch in 2012. And the next question you're probably wondering is, how does Comstack make money? And that is through our enterprise platform. So even if you're not a broker or an appraiser and are on the investment or management side, you're still able to access our data and use Comstack through our enterprise platform, which operates on an annual subscription basis. So some of our clients on the enterprise side are, as you can see here, Wells Fargo, Tishman Speyer, PwC, Boston Properties, and many more. So we currently have a promotion, and also per the partnership with CCIM, all brokers and appraisers who sign up with Comstack, you'll be able to access 20 comps before making your first submission. So that means just by signing up with Comstack, you get to have 20 free comps at no cost. You don't even have to make your first submission. So you really don't have nothing to lose. So you can give me a call. My number is right here. You can also give me an email. And so my phone is right here. And hopefully I get to connect with some of you today and discuss how Comstack may help. And we'll just also learn more about your firm and your team. And if you're not a broker and appraiser, I can still put you in contact with my colleagues on the enterprise team who will schedule a demo with you to show you our enterprise platform and so on. And that concludes my presentation. And I'll pass it back to you, Doug, for questions.
Thank you so much, Sang. Very interesting concept that you guys have. I'm very interested in getting my initial look, and I will certainly be reaching out to you. And by the way, we're going to include your information on a follow-up email that we're going to send out to all the attendees for those who don't have the ability to write it down. But a couple of questions that were submitted. So what have you guys done differently as a company, Comstack, during the pandemic to expand the database?
Yeah, great question, Doug. So during the pandemic, it was an interesting year for us, and we have received more data in 2020 than we have in any other year. And we think that it was partly due to the pandemic, where brokers and appraisers had more time to explore Comstack, learn more about our platform, and integrate our platform and our data into their workflows. And also, we've seen an emphasis in historical data. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of requests for historical data so our clients can make economic models for comparing the historical recession to the current one to have a better idea of what's going to happen with the economy, the starting rents, the concessions, whatnot. And we've also seen a lot more emphasis on the data itself. So we have received more data than we ever have. And Q4 of 2020 was our best quarter for our enterprise team so far.
Interesting. And, you know, I'm as a rental property broker, multifamily, obviously comps are very important in my neck of the woods. And there's not a lot of great commercial comparable sale providers out there. It sounds like you guys are aggregating a lot of the data. Do you have kind of an analysis or an example of what kind of analysis you guys can provide with your data?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great question to go over for CCIM, since we have brokers and also people on the investment side. So with Comstack's lease and sales comps, you're able to build economic models and also for acquisition teams, you're able to, how our current clients are using it currently is they use our data to build deal sheets to justify their deals for acquisitions, usually very opportunistic, and also for asset management to see how the other landlords are giving out their rents, whatnot. And specifically for the pandemic, what we've seen our data, for example, in the office market, is we've seen an increase in free rent, which is also what happened during the 2008 financial crisis that we've seen through our data. And we've also seen increase in delayed commencement. So that is probably due to tenants having to say, well, we would like the space in the future, but we don't really need it right now. So instead of giving us free rent, if you can give us delayed commencement, that'll also be beneficial. And it's also good for the landlords in that they don't want to lock in any long-term rates while the market is down. So I think that's the balance we're also seeing, but also industrial assets outperforming all the other asset classes, as we've probably all seen during the pandemic.
Well, thank you, Sang. That's a lot of great information, and it really ties in nicely. Your services tie in nicely to the presentation that we're going to be moving on to. So thank you for sponsoring our Lunch and Learn today, and we look forward to learning more about Comstock in the future.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, and for those of you who don't know a little bit about CCIM, CCIM is short for Certified Commercial Investment Member. We are a worldwide organization of real estate industry professionals who go through additional training, coursework, get additional skills in order to serve investors. There's a 50-year legacy of earning, oops, on this side, I'm looking backwards, earning the CCIM pen. And quite honestly, for those that are interested in getting involved in CCIM, certainly reach out to us. You can go to our website, which is ccimsandiego.com. We also have a YouTube channel, and we're on LinkedIn. So certainly follow us on all of those platforms, and we're constantly trying to provide good, up-to-date, collaborative information and promote excellence among our industry. So that's really what CCIM is all about. Again, if you have more questions, please reach out to us. And we're very grateful for all of our sponsors, including our Friends of CCIM sponsors, which I'll go through now. We have Heck Solberg, Marcus and Millichap, Savills, and PMB Advanced Healthcare Professionals. And then our gold sponsors are CoStar, Exeter 1031 Exchange Services, Mission Federal Credit Union, Slat Capital, and SCS Engineers. We are, again, very thankful to have sponsors, especially in these changing times. Organization like ours certainly appreciate all of your sponsorship. Now we're going to do our poll. This is where we have a chance to learn more about who's in our audience for our event today. So as you see the poll pop up, please take a moment to check off how you are falling into the different categories. And it's always interesting to find out and certainly watch the poll set in, kind of like the polls last night as we were watching the political polls. This one is always interesting. And let's see who we have in the audience today. So far, owner investors are the primary category. Of course, brokers, pretty standard. Doesn't look like we have any developers or lenders today, but they may just be on the phone because they're typically pretty busy people. But as usual, our owner investor category is our largest category, and we're thankful for all of our attendees, and we're happy that you continue to show up to our events, and we hope to continue to provide you with relevant content. All right, now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Gary London is Senior Principal and Founding Partner of London Meter Advisors, providing feasibility analysis, market research, strategic advice, and capital packaging for investors, lenders, and developers. Gary's work has resulted in the creation of master plan communities, mixed-use projects, substantial built product, as well as numerous transactions. Over the past 5 decades, Mr. London has counseled many of the nation's most successful entrepreneurs and public officials about the built environment, how to transform our cities, and prepare for a future that will be unlike the past. I like that. And I met Gary personally a few years ago when I attended his USD extension course, Projects in Action. It was an awesome course. During that course, we visited 4 different high-profile developments throughout San Diego County. And we actually got to meet with the principals, sit there and listen to their vision of the project, and they gave us a personal tour. If you have a chance, if you see that that course comes back around, I highly recommend that you consider attending. And at this point, please welcome our speaker today, Mr. Gary London. Gary, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Hey, Doug, maybe we need to take the 5 decades thing out of my introduction.
I didn't put it there. I think that came from your office.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll have to talk to that person.
Welcome, Gary.
Hey, I'm just feeling old listening to me. We'll see where we go from here.
All right.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here again with CCIM. Always enjoy coming and visiting with you all and presenting. I think what I'm going to do is just give sort of a tour of the economy and the real estate market and try to press through it as quickly as I can so I can address questions that many of you might have. I think I'll start with just the general economy and sort of tunnel my way down to the San Diego region, and then we'll go through all the different food groups in San Diego and give you sort of an update of what's going on there. And Paris, don't let me forget to talk a little bit about politics and demographics and those kinds of things in case I go one direction instead of the other. But let me just start out with, let me share this. Let me go into the screen and do this. Okay. Can you see this chart? Your screen sharing. Okay, so this first chart says, I can't see if you can see the chart shared. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm preparing for a national presentation next week. So we're putting together some sort of just general economic information. And it just interested me to put the US into perspective with the rest of the globe. This first chart basically shows that, as the notes indicate, the US leads the G7 peers in the recovery from the pandemic with respect to GDP. We've done a pretty good job. We had a sharp recession, a sharp but brief recession, and then we've sort of had growth since there, although growth has been obviously lagging because of the resurgence of Delta. We thought this was all going to be behind us at the beginning of the summer. That didn't happen. So here we are again, but we are doing relatively well relative to the rest of the G7. And you can see that a lot of that is a result of the fact that that we've been really aggressive with respect to our response. That obviously has to do with the vaccines more than anything. And even today, we got the grim news that 1 in 500 Americans have died of COVID, but it's not equal around the country. In other words, San Diego is in pretty good shape. If you're up in the northeast of this country, the extreme northeast, you're in good shape. But if you're in the southeast, red states, for some crazy political reason, you're not in good shape. So it's not geographically well dispersed, but we have put up a major effort. We still haven't seen the results yet, again, because of the resurgence of Delta. But and the other thing that everybody is interested in is inflation. And while, the national economists don't seem to express a huge amount of worry about inflation, you can see our inflation rates are pretty high relative to other countries. And I think if any of us have gone to a hotel or eaten at a restaurant or just tried to buy something like a car, even a used car, you can see inflation in terms of our practical everyday life. So we're sort of stumbling through the a recovery period right now nationally. With COVID, there are a lot of things that were going to change or were changing in real estate. And COVID came along, and a lot of the things that were evolving started to happen very quickly. In fact, the term I use in some presentations is from evolution to revolution. So experiments in the commercial world, retail, office, industrial, even residential, changes were going on, and we were evolving new kinds of buildings and new kinds of business and home lifestyles. But when COVID came on, we really being forced to stay at home and forced to shop from home and forced to office at home and forced to have our kids at home. A lot of the evolution became a revolution. So then the question becomes, what is sticky when we eventually get to what may be assumed to be a post-COVID environment? And what isn't sticky? So I created this chart called Human and Economic Changes to sort of discuss what might be temporary changes and what might be permanent changes in our market. So on the temporary side, you can see things like, maybe this isn't so temporary, with the new school year, Zoom classrooms, leisure travel, business travel, work from home. Maybe those are more temporary. And on the permanent side, you can see that our reliance on technology has gotten stronger. The office market is obviously changing. There's retail downsizing going on. I'm going to talk about all these over the next few minutes, but this gives you a sense of, on the right side, permanent equals sticky. On the left side, temporary equals non-sticky. And we're seeing these changes sort of play out throughout the various food groups in San Diego. Now, with this up, let me also just talk a little bit about, here, let me just stop the share for a minute. And I'm going to go to a different slide, and then I'll bring the share back up again in a minute. But essentially, San Diego is in a pretty good spot relative to COVID and relative to the world going forward. We continue to have an economically diverse region with about 1/3 of our employment either directly or indirectly connected to the military and military consulting and consignment, that sort of thing. And that represents a really strong economic base for our region. And we're really well diversified. There's no one economic event involving one sector that's going to take down the region. So whether it's high technology or biotech or communication technology or general business or any of the various categories that aerospace, you name it, any of the categories that sort of matter to San Diego economically, not one is dominant. We've seen growth in obviously the life science sector, but it doesn't represent a huge portion of our overall employment yet, even though it's growing. So that diversification allows San Diego to stay in pretty good shape economically. Demographically, the region has definitely slowed down with respect to net immigration. We've had very slow years, and this may be very sticky, very permanent, in which we're at least growing domestically. Partly that's due to people not moving around as much, partly due to some people moving out. International migration has been way down, partly political, partly COVID. That should recover. And fertility rates are real down around the country and certainly in San Diego. So that's contributing to population increases of substantially lesser amounts than over the last few years than what we experienced prior, and certainly what we experienced in the 20th century. So what does that mean with respect to us going forward? Well, essentially, we are still growing at some level, but about half the level that we used to grow. And we're still expanding economically. And at some point, there's going to be kind of a conundrum. And I think we've sort of reached that point over the last couple of years where we're not able to supply even to the lower levels of demand that that we've seen, particularly in the housing sector. In the housing sector, we're delivering regularly well on 10,000 units or less every year. Most of the inventory is rental. Very little of it is single family anymore, principally because we've run out of developable, entitleable land for single family housing. And that's a real big issue, probably the biggest issue that we have in the region. But the overall numbers are down. And that has bid up the price of housing, both in terms of sale prices and in terms of rental rates. When you have lower construction levels, essentially people are competing for existing inventory. Existing inventory has been bid up. The time on market is way reduced. The amount of inventory that's out there for sale is way down. New construction is way down, and new construction of the right type in the right places is way down. So of any single family homes that are being built, for instance, in the region, most of that's being built in Chula Vista. And if you want a single family home and you're a growing family, and this is a real problem right now, the major sector that we're not supplying to are growing families, basically millennials who are in childbearing years and marrying, coupling and raising children, that either they're going to be stuck in apartments or they're commuting from their new homes in South County to their jobs in North County or North City, which creates a whole nother problem with respect to congestion and disconnect between where we live and where we work. People are moving to Riverside, not just Southern Riverside like Temecula, but areas even further out, which creates a lot of congestion on the I-15 corridor of San Diego employed heads of households who are raising their families in Riverside because they can't find housing in San Diego. And that's really sort of our new reality with respect to housing right now. Is that temporary or is that permanent? Well, I would view that as a permanent situation. I don't view housing prices as really coming down significantly. Certainly supply and demand imbalance is going to keep housing prices up. Are we going to continue to see the verticality of the increase in housing prices that we've seen over the past couple of years? Probably not. We may be at a peak, but it might be a long peak. It might last a half a year or more. What might change the pricing scenario, at least the peak, the verticality of the increase scenario, is certainly not going to be construction. That's just not in the cards. It will be higher interest rates in terms of takeout or what we call home mortgages. If the Feds increase the discount rate and that bleeds into long-term takeout rates, which creates ultimately higher interest payments, that might create a more stabilized for sale housing market. When you can't buy a house, you rent a house. So what's happened in the rental market, or your rented apartment, is that rental rates are correspondingly high as well. And I just got off a Zoom call this morning on a new project that one of my clients is building in North Park. And we're just projecting rental rates at unprecedented, I should say rent levels, what you pay per month for rent at unprecedented levels. I mean, it started downtown where we're getting very huge rates, well north of $3 a foot, and in the luxury projects approaching $4 a foot, even more for some recently open ones. We're going to start to see those kind of numbers in other markets. Even Mission Valley, which has enjoyed a renaissance of new apartment projects, mostly owed to the fact that, well, the demand is there. Mission Valley continues to be well located. It's sort of a tic-tac-toe board of the freeway corridors. And the new community plan has invited residential and mixed-use projects. So we see, obviously the new Trammell Crow project, the new Low project in front of Town and Country. You're going to see the Riverwalk project by Hines be master plan developed. You're going to see San Diego State create housing and invite new developers out at formerly Qualcomm site, and lots of places in between. So Mission Valley is hot. It's going to continue to be hot. And while it's less expensive order of magnitude than say downtown, still see a lot of high rents there. And these high rent levels are going to occur all over the central and North City areas. A lot of housing will be built on the rental levels, but again, we're always going to be playing catch up. The housing shortage is perpetual. It's not temporary. We will see ups and downs a little bit, as we always do. We always have cycles, but the peak of the next cycle is always higher than the peak of the previous cycles. And I just see that situation as continuing. Just going through the different food groups, let me just show you. I'm gonna go back to share for a minute. I'm gonna show you a really cool chart here that we created a couple months ago. This is a chart of office demand in the US. So what I did was I went through a little mind exercise, and I said, if office demand as a result of COVID, people working at home, decreases at different levels, what does that mean in terms of overall reduction in the in-office workforce? So what I did is I randomly took 1 out of 10 or 10% reduction, a 5% reduction, or a really modest 2.5% reduction. And I show, based on what we know is the amount of per square feet per employee in the office sector, how many square feet reduction we're really talking about overall in the United States. And you can see that the numbers are incredible in terms of the top orange line there. That's the amount of square feet that of reduction in terms of office space that we don't need. And what that translates to is the fact that the office construction market is going to be relatively small going forward. We're still going to see some office construction for reasons that I'll get into in a minute, but we're not going to see the kind of office of office development that we've seen historically. In fact, if you go to any of the major office buildings in any of the major markets in San Diego, you'll find that while the leases are still in place, the actual occupancies are dramatically reduced. Again, because people like me are working from home, and like most of you, there's some stickiness to that. My own view is that people will go back to the office at some point, and generally, and to some extent are. My staff is back in their office. We're in precautionary mode, but they're all working in their office. I'm not, in our office in Carlsbad. I'm not. And what you're going to find is that there's going to be sort of a transition, and this goes a little bit to what Doug was talking about earlier, from people that are, I should say, companies that will have more flexible approaches to how they allow their employees to work. But what we're not going to see is a wholesale abandonment of the office market. What we're going to see is a reduction in the amount of square feet per office employee. You can see on this chart that I'm using 185 square feet per employee. If I go back 2 decades, say the 1990s, then the metric that we would be using is 250 square feet per employee. And the change, the reduction, was initially a result of the fact that we have technology and we don't need as much space, and we can eliminate the middle sort of helper people, administrative people. But now the changes are also going to be the result of the fact that some people will work at home some of the time. And so that is going to inform our office market going forward. So when we see growth in the office sector, what the growth is going to be in terms of the expansion of the overall economy, new companies coming in, new companies growing up in San Diego. That is why, for instance, in downtown San Diego, we see a huge effort on the part of, say, the new RAD project that's being built on that magnificent site in front of the bay next to Seaport Village. That's going to ultimately house a couple million square feet of office in a mixed use project. And then you've got the Horton Plaza project. And then coming after that will be a large project that the Padres are doing with Tishman Speyer in their in their parking lot just east of the stadium. And then even Kilroy has a project, a 2-block project up in East Village, which probably will have substantial office space when it's finally introduced. So what's happening there? Well, the idea there is that despite the trends, we need space for life science and technology. In the gambit there, the throw of the dice is that downtown will resurge as a place that will accommodate life science. So it's that kind of growth which we might see expanding the office market in certain parts of the region, in this case downtown. But overall, we're going to see a compression of office space. The other thing that has changed, and this goes back to the slide I was showing earlier, this slide here, is we've seen, and I've been talking about this for a long time, in a change in how retail is delivered. A lot of my business in my financial studies and in my market studies is focused on old shopping centers, or I don't even want to say old, some aren't so old. A lot of them are what I'll just call vestigial centers, whose sort of place is no longer secured. We don't need as much retail space. Why don't we not need so much retail space? Well, first of all, we built too much in the first place over the past few decades. Secondly, the introduction over the past couple of decades of online retailing has had a slow but now very significant role in the reduction of bricks and mortar retail space. And even in shopping centers which are still successful, like UTC or Fashion Valley or some of the outlet malls, you're seeing big changes in terms of their tenancy, not just in terms of old tenants failing and new tenants coming in, but you're seeing the size of the bricks and mortar space go way down. I walked into the glasses store in Fashion Valley yesterday, and not only had they changed locations in Fashion Valley, but they cut in half their footprint because there's now a coming together, convergence of virtual retailing and on-site retailing. Virtual, just because you buy at Amazon doesn't mean you don't go to Fashion Valley. It just means you go less often, and you go because there's a leisure component associated with it. You still want to touch certain goods. You still want to be out there. You might eat at the restaurant. So the composition of the retailing of a lot of the shopping centers is changing. The other thing that's going on is some centers are failing. Like, for instance, I don't want to, let me not do the for instance, but there's big centers, big regional centers, and small neighborhood or community size centers ranging from 100,000 feet to 1 million feet that are failing. And the development response there, and this is where we do spend a lot of our time, is in recreating those same sites into usually residentially dominated mixed-use projects. So we keep a retailing component there. And by the way, this is what Horton Plaza is going to be. The retailing part of Horton Plaza was an 800,000 foot retail center that's going to compress to a couple 100,000 square foot retail, still have retail and restaurants, that sort of thing, but the rest of it is going to go office. In other projects, the major dominant component will be residential with a smaller retail footprint. So we're going to see those kinds of changes occur. We're also seeing in San Diego, and this goes with San Diego's new sort of planning and political philosophy that we call complete communities, where a lot of the old commercial corridors like Market Street or El Cajon Boulevard or University Avenue, these big commercial corridors which are serviced by transit, usually bus transit, to some extent trolley, are sort of being reinvented, where we're going to see still some commercial on the ground, but we're going to see the redevelopment or the tearing down of old buildings and the reconstruction of residential projects with commercial on the ground. I'm doing a lot of work in that area, so we're going to see a lot of those changes as well that are going to create opportunities. Let's see here. So let me go over here to this chart since I have this open. So we've talked about office. Hotel is interesting right now. I don't know if any of you have been doing some traveling just to get out of the house, but hotel rooms that used to be $400 a night are $1,000 a night right now. In other words, the hoteliers are a couple of things are going on. One, they're trying to make up for lost revenue over the last year. can't blame them for doing that. They're to some extent being successful, especially the well-located luxury hotels or boutique hotels. The other thing is that they're just trading on the residential market right now. And there are three levels of demand in hoteling. One is, I'm sorry, not residential, but visitor market. One is visitor. The other is just general business travel. The third is conference or meeting travel. Well, business travel and conference and meeting travel are practically non-existent. Here we are doing Zoom. I haven't done a live conference presentation since the beginning of COVID. I'm doing my first one next week, a national conference coming to San Diego next week, but that's highly unusual and that'll be the first. So the hotels have taken a big hit. They're doing some makeup revenue this summer because people thought COVID was over and they started traveling. But that's still a very dicey proposition, the hotel sector. It took the biggest hit of any of the sectors. It's going to take the longest to come back and reach some level of stabilization. And then the other food group, which is interesting, is industrial. Industrial has done very well over the past couple of years, but not because it's industrial. That's the most misnamed use ever at this point. If you just look at San Diego's industrial, most of it isn't. Old tilt-up, one-story, cheaply built buildings that were sort of big horizontal structures have mostly transformed into warehouses, like Amazon. Amazon's doing a ground up down at Otay Mesa, which I had a chance to visit. It's amazing to walk into a 3 million square foot, 3.5 million square foot horizontal building. They do have a couple of floors. It's all robotics, even though they are going to employ about 3,000 people there, but essentially just moving goods through it, not actually building anything. And so industrial has been able to take sort of the back office space for retailers that are compressing in size. They're holding inventory in what formerly was industrial space. And there's some technology that is sort of surge industrial as well. So that's what's informed the industrial market and has kept it, fairly prosperous over the past couple of years. It's so again, a misnomer change, but good for that particular sector. So generally speaking, that gives you a little bit of snapshot. I'd be happy to expand on any of those areas when we get into to Q&A here. How are we doing in time? We have a few minutes still. Let me just be a little bit more esoteric here and go to the future. I think we need to start thinking seriously about what San Diego's role in climate change is going to be. And I haven't talked to a lot of people about this right now, but I've been thinking about it. And I think that if you overlay maps of climate change in just the United States, if you overlay a water map, if you overlay a heat map, if you overlay a sea rise increase map, and if you overlay a disaster map like wildfires and so forth, I think what you're going to find is a few sweet spots in this country that are going to do well with climate change. Obviously, northern climates in the Midwest to some extent, upper Northeast, and the West Coast, all of it, particularly the California West Coast, and particularly San Diego. So just to sort of make a long story short and put some perspective here, I sort of look at San Diego as being in the sweet spot of climate change. We've done well to manage our water. If you look at a pie chart of how we're getting water, it's a little desal, it's a little conservation, it's a little Colorado River, it's a little Imperial Valley, it's a little Delta. We've done a really good job. The region's done a really good job managing their water, and I expect that to continue. If you look at sea rise, it doesn't affect us. We live on a cliff. I'm talking to you from my home office, which is my accessory dwelling unit in Point Loma. If I look that way, I'm seeing the sea down at Sunset Cliffs, and it's a big drop. So, it's not Miami. So that factors there. There's heat, but if you're on the coast, on the West Coast, we're not feeling the heat like almost everywhere else in the country feels it, even today. And if you are concerned about disaster, well, we've always had earthquakes here, but we don't have hurricanes. We don't. The wildfires can get here, but again, not so much on the urban coast. So that's just sort of, I want to put that in perspective to sort of suggest to all of you that that we probably are going to be in a pretty good place going forward. And that alone will inform employment increases, which will continue to generate demand for housing and bid up for pricing of housing of all sorts, and make San Diego a much more urban place. Essentially, we're becoming a more urban community, and that's been an evolution. And in the future, it's going to be become more urban as we deal with scarcity of land. I think that a lot of people don't like to talk about, don't think about this, but I think that the advent of autonomous automobiles, when they eventually find themselves in our garages, or we use them perhaps not in our garages, will have a huge impact on the shape of our region, have a huge impact on how we build buildings, because if we have autonomous automobiles, we don't need to park them. Will have a huge impact on how we're going to do mass transit, or if we're going to do it going forward. So technology is going to play a big role in terms of how San Diego is going to look going forward. I think with that, I'll stop. Despite my 5 decades, Doug, I always look forward. I still have a few decades left, I hope. And I think we're in a pretty good place going forward in San Diego. So with that, I'll stop, take a breath, and see if anybody has any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Wow, that was definitely a unique spin on the climate change piece. Very insightful thought there, and not bad for a 50-year-old. Paris, are you with us? Do you have some questions that were submitted for Gary?
Yes. Oh, sorry for the echo. Yeah. Hi. Is the echo away now?
It's gone.
Sorry for the tech issue. I think first, I do personally have 2 questions for Gary when it comes to the remark on San Diego's position on climate change. I'm curious to know, like, how can commercial real estate investors and developers capture San Diego's position in climate change? Assuming how, like, the national market would change as the climate change and the environment change for all of the other markets, and how will we interact with other areas and capitalize on that opportunity?
I am not sure how to answer that question. I will say that I think a lot of people, a lot of companies come here for 2 reasons. One is because they feel that they can, or they expand here for 2 reasons. One is they feel that the employment base, the quality of the employment, the types of professionals that are here are the type that they can draw from and grow from. And I think in the clusters that are here, obviously life science, technology clusters, communication technology, those and many others, obviously aerospace, all have a role. But the other part of it, and this goes with climate change, is quality of life. I think that quality of life is always a factor here. I will tell you that one of the reasons that we're growing in the technology areas is because we're drawing from, one way or the other, from the high cost of the San Francisco Bay Area. So expansion of companies like Apple, which has a huge footprint now in San Diego. I don't know if you saw their introduction video yesterday of the iPhones and stuff, but a portion, the whole iPhone presentation was done from the base of the San Diego Symphony shell. And that was obviously edified the fact that they have a huge presence down here. Why is Apple down here? Apple's down here because it's a less expensive place for their employees to be, with a much higher quality of life. So I think if you sort of correlate climate change with quality of life, with weather and just less propensity for disaster or changes or flooding or hurricanes, all those things. I think that translates into positive, a positive growth for San Diego. So that's how I would look at climate change relative to our market.
Got it. Very cool. Thank you. The second question would be, you mentioned urbanization in San Diego area. So I felt that generally the public sentiment and there's some political opposition against urbanization or density in general in the San Diego area. How much do you think that will slow down the trend that you project?
Listen, there's always political opposition in San Diego. I've been working on both the sports arena projects, and I've been working, and I did all the economic work on the mobility hub for Sandag on the Sandag Navy sites down here. And there are already signs up in Mission Hills and opposition online to the mobility hub and to the redevelopment of the sports arena. Now, I have to tell you, Paris, I can't think of an area more crying out for redevelopment in San Diego than that area. I mean, basically, the sports arena area is the armpit of San Diego, and yet you still have opposition. You had opposition to the taking away the height limit earlier, minor opposition at one. You had that. Now you have opposition to redevelopment of sports arena for reasons that are peculiar. Well, you don't blame the people of Mission Hills. Maybe they're going to lose some views, although that probably is a bigger deal for most. But you're going to have opposition from people in the sports arena because they're complaining about more traffic. Are you kidding me? More traffic than the traffic that's already there, and the ugliness is already there, and the inefficiencies are already there, and you still have opposition. So we're always going to have opposition to everything. And the art of development is to basically try to create the best project you can create and recognize that you're just going to have to work through your opposition. And sometimes you're more successful than others. I worked on the One Paseo project in Carmel Valley, which was like the 100% location for a new real estate project. There is not a better site in all of San Diego than the site that One Paseo built on. And we won city council approval to build a 250,000 square foot shopping center and all the residential office that went with it. And Kilroy was threatened with more opposition after years of opposition that they overcame. And they capitulated and they built a very lovely, but way smaller footprint, like 90,000 square foot retail center. So and it's just not the project that we had anticipated. And it's just a waste of great property. And there's some disproportions too, like the parking garage looks too big now. So, I mean, what I'm really trying to say is that different developers make different decisions in the face of opposition, and opposition is expensive and it will always be here. It's part of human nature, but it's worth it, because this is a market that that is interesting to, as I said earlier, to a lot of new companies, to a lot of new people, and probably is a really valued market going forward with factors like climate change. So it's there. It's the art of overcoming it.
It's encouraging to hear. Thank you, Gary. All right, let's get to one of our audience question. So Gary, can you speak on homelessness in San Diego? Since many areas that haven't had experienced that before now is experiencing homelessness post-COVID or at this stage of the pandemic. What comment or thought do you have on that?
Well, I don't have any original thoughts other than I'm sad for the homeless. I'm disappointed that we haven't had the political courage to address what really is the problem, which is that, I mean, we're always sort of biting around the edges, right? The police do the cleanups, the people come back. We put housing up, that's helpful for some people. We have counseling centers, the new ones coming up in the sports arena area. These are all helpful. But in the mid 80s, during the Reagan governorship, we basically abandon asylums, institutions for people that just can't take care of themselves. And this homeless problem is not going to go away until we reinstitute institutionalization of those people and get those people off the streets. I just think that's a huge deal. There's a lot of factors associated with it, but what's most disappointing is that it does retard the development of promising new neighborhoods like East Village. I own property in East Village, for instance, and I've owned property there for 20 years. And the problem, if anything, is bigger today than it was 20 years ago. And we thought by now, with all the new businesses and residential and people on the ground, it would go away. And it isn't. And it doesn't go away because we tolerate it as a community. We may not tolerate it. We may say that we don't tolerate it as voters and as a community, but we really do. And part of it is because I guess our hands are tied because we can't get the people off the street and get them the help that they need. So until we step up and do that, I think this problem will persist.
Understood. Yeah, it's definitely a long-stemming issue in a lot of the city, including San Diego.
By the way, you think the problem is bad here? You should go to West LA. I mean, just if you just go to the entry of Brentwood, where the cemetery is on Wilshire Boulevard, turning into Brentwood, you just have tents lined up this is one of the most affluent parts of the country, just tents lined up all the way over there. And the government somehow tolerates it. So the problem is really acute in LA, it's really acute in San Francisco. It's order of magnitude less acute in San Diego. So something's got to break.
Following up on that, like our audience said that we don't want San Diego to become like LA or San Francisco. So instead of coming back to the sports arena project, maybe instead of building in an already congested area, perhaps build in a less congested area instead. Would that be more helpful, and would that be feasible?
No. I know we're running up against the clock here. Let me just tell you in a few words that that doesn't exist anymore, Paris. Essentially, all we really can do is reconceptualize our already existing urban areas. The name of the game, where the action is going to be over the next decade, is going to be in the existing neighborhoods of San Diego, particularly in urban San Diego, that's south of I-8 and along the mesas north of I-8, the Claremonts and the Convoys and places going north from there, to redevelop those old residential and industrial and commercial neighborhoods. That's where the action is going to be. And that's where it ought to be, because those are the central parts of the community. So the idea isn't to try to create new communities on green fields. It just doesn't exist anymore. Partly the reason it doesn't exist, this will be my parting shot, I think, is that the county of San Diego, the unincorporated areas, have basically elected not to participate in the increase in the development of new communities and to contribute to building housing. There's lots of unincorporated areas, particularly along the I-15 corridor, that are ripe candidates for new housing, and the county won't let it be built. That's, to make a long story short. And that's a big factor that has contributed to the crisis. So the name of the game is concentrate on the existing urban areas and build them up in a quality way. And that's what most of my clients are doing. And I'm feeling pretty optimistic about that going forward.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for that sobering answer. Lastly, I'd just like to bring up one question for our sponsor, Comstock. Saying, so how does Comstock compare to CoStar and LoopNet and like-kind platforms?
Thank you, Paris. So this is another great question. And the main difference between us and CoStar or LoopNet is how we collect our data and how that eventually entails to our data quality. So because our users have an incentive to submit complete and recent comps, therefore getting that back to our users. So when they trade comps with us, they get comps out of our system. So that incentive enables us to collect good and recent data that contains starting rents instead of asking rents, and the concession data as well, such as TI and free rent, which enables our users to get the full story of the comp instead of just knowing what the rent was asked for. And since we don't do any listings, you can be sure that the comps you're seeing on Comstack is from a closed transaction.
Cool. Thank you, Sang. Handing the floor back to you, Doug.
All right. Thank you, Paris. And Sang, thank you so much. Analysis data certainly goes hand in hand with what Gary just did an incredible talk on with regarding the development of San Diego. Thanks, Gary. That, quite honestly, very positive, very optimistic outlook. And, you know, the data doesn't lie. And I basically agree with you 100%. It just, you got a lot of good insight there. So thank you so much. I'm sure the attendees loved it. And certainly check in next month if you're wanting to hear more about the residential aspect. We are going to be hosting our 30th year, actually, our annual apartment perspective that we host with the Southern California Rental Housing Association. Obviously, that's a multifamily and residential is a hot topic, even in this talk that Gary did here in San Diego. So please check in. That is going to be on the 14th. And that is going to be a live event. So if you're looking to get out and go and actually see live people, then check in on that event. Also, be sure to follow up on our YouTube channel and certainly follow us on LinkedIn. And Gary, from CCIM San Diego, big thank you for taking the time today. Again, very insightful. We know you're a busy guy and always appreciate when you spend some time with us here at CCIM San Diego.
Thanks, Doug. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir. Sang, thank you to Comstock for sponsoring our event today. Another very insightful company that looks like you guys are doing some different things to try to stay competitive. It's a competitive field, but as a broker, you know, we do appreciate good data. And Paris, thank you for your assistance as well. So that's all for us today. Sorry, we went a little bit over, guys, but we appreciate you and have a great month from CCIM San Diego.
Thank you all. Bye.
Yeah.